at the NBA Finals, but a slow start made the challenge almost impossible. And on a night when Jimmy Butler played all 48 minutes of the game, a 13-point lead was reduced to just 2 with a chance to win it, but Butler missed a 3-point attempt to take the lead, and the Heat fall to the Boston Celtics 196. Miami's season comes to an end, and we'll break down the game onto this live edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Monday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be listening or watching on YouTube, on Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. 77. That's the percentage of teams that win a Game 7 at home throughout NBA history. And Miami, after a difficult season, had home court advantage against the Boston Celtics. But the same problems that have dogged this team throughout the series, offensive struggles, a lack of three-point shooting, and long scoreless droughts, plagued the Heat early on as the Celtics built a 17-point lead in the first quarter. Miami would slowly chip away at it, led by Jimmy Butler, who scored 35 points to lead all scorers and to prove once again that he was the best player in this series. He played every second of the game. Every time the Heat came close, however, Boston seemed to have a response, and with 3.5 minutes left in the game, the Celtics held on to a 13-point lead that seemed almost insurmountable. But just as you would expect from a Heat team that has refused to quit at any point, they answered back with an 11-point run to cut the lead to 2. Marcus Smart missed a layup, and then Butler secured the rebound, drove the length of the floor, and with 16.6 seconds left, pulled up for a wide-open 3 that unfortunately rimmed out. The Heat were forced to foul, putting Smart on the line for 2 made free throws. Miami had 2 more chances to cut the lead with the clock dwindling, but ultimately couldn't get it done, and the Heat lose in heartbreaking fashion, 196. Wes, tough loss, capping a fantastic game, a fantastic comeback by Miami, and an overall incredible season for them. I guess the big question is whether or not Jimmy should have attempted a 3. I think that's the question that everybody really has is, the broadcast made it seem like he shouldn't have taken. You and I were discussing it even before we jumped on the show. I'm not sure how you feel about it exactly, but I personally was not a fan of this shot.
Yeah, and just to backtrack a little bit more, Max Strus making that 3 to cap off an 11-0 run and just turn that into a 2-point game to set up the Marcus Smart layup that he missed. The Heat have the ball going down in transition, and the first time, as it happened, I hated it. I was like, why are you shooting this 3? I absolutely hated the shot. And then I saw the replay and the fact that he had the angle on Al Horford and there was no backline help. And I hated it even more after I saw the replay. And then I just keep thinking about it. You know what? If I'm going to play devil's advocate here, just to maybe support Jimmy Butler in this decision, I'm not sure there really is a logical way to support the decision. I really didn't love the shot. He had the angle on Horford, could have just put his head down, drive to the basket, layup, or even a dunk potentially, and tie the game, right? And give yourself a chance there. But there was not a lot of time, but there was enough time left on the clock where you could take this 3 in a game that you never led. You essentially go on this last gasp run. If you're Jimmy Butler, you've played all 48 minutes in this game. I kind of see why at that point you would want to just say, you know what, let's just go for the lead. And again, there wasn't a ton of time left there, but there was enough time that even if you missed that shot, which he did, you could potentially get a stop on defense and then come back and have a chance to either tie or win the game on the other end. Unfortunately, he didn't get a stop on the other end. Right. What was a 1-possession game turned into a 2-possession game, and Max Strus had a couple looks at the end, but even that, it was still a 2-possession game at that point. So I could see why Jimmy Butler did it. I didn't love it. But if you're a star in this league, those are the shots that you get to take. Those are the decisions you are allowed to make. And Jimmy Butler, throughout this entire postseason, has earned the right to take that shot. And
absolutely.
If there's the only logical explanation for it really, David, is Jimmy Butler thought he could make it. Yeah. And if he thought that, he's kind of earned the right to make that decision. So it's hard to get mad at him for it, but
Yeah.
I logically can't. I don't think he should have taken the three.
I'm not mad, and I agree with you 100%. Jimmy is a superstar. He has been one of the best players, if not the best players, throughout the playoffs. He's had some fantastic games. Certainly, a 47-point outing in Game 6 gave him the credibility and the right to do whatever he thinks was the right decision at the time. I just also think, and again, this is something I mentioned to you before we started recording, it felt like the wrong basketball decision from a player who almost always makes the right one. And considering what you mentioned about Horford, the lack of defense from Boston, if he had driven the lane, cut the lead to 1 with maybe 14 seconds left in the game at that point, if he had been able to drive past Horford, that's enough to foul somebody, get a chance again, maybe have another miracle shot where you can set yourself up there. But for a shooter like Jimmy, despite the fact that he's been making the three regularly throughout the playoffs, it just didn't feel like the right decision. And I hate questioning it. Moreover, just because, well, it shouldn't have come down to this in the first place. Jimmy was the only reason Miami was in this game in the first place. The team
Right.
shot 20% from three-point range. Everybody and their grandmother missed free throws at one point or another. It was a struggle all game long for them to score. And not necessarily because of Boston's defense, but just rather, well, I don't know, just a lack of ability to make those shots. And I don't think it should have come down to a three-pointer. Miami had every opportunity to be able to close out this game and just couldn't get it done. They should never have fallen behind early on. I saw a lot of people questioning Miami's drive and intensity, whether or not they were engaged early on. That's something that's very unfamiliar for this Heat team because they almost always understand what's at stake and they always rise to the challenge, or at least they had. Tonight was not the case. They started off slowly and yet still managed to come back, still managed to claw their way into it, only because of Jimmy Butler and his 35 points. So the three-point shot will be dissected, will be talked about, will be debated. I don't necessarily like the shot, but he's absolutely earned the right to take it.
Yeah, and to Rob's point here in the comments, that might have been the best look the Heat got on that possession. Like, Boston's defense was excellent this entire game. So was Miami's. I mean, this was a defensive battle between these two teams. I thought both defenses played at a really high level in this game. There is an argument to be made that that might have been Miami's best chance to take the lead at that point. And so the more we're kind of going over this. So I don't know if it's just because I'm like playing devil's advocate here, but I do really feel like the more I think about it, the more I don't have a problem with the shot.
From that perspective, you're right. I mean, like if he takes that shot and makes it, and maybe it's a miracle, but one that he's actually accomplished in times past. You're up 1 there, and you're putting the pressure on Boston to score. And given some of the trouble some of their star players have had, the fact that they crumble in key situations as they have throughout the regular season and postseason, it's not a bad chance. It's not a bad opportunity to seal the game and give yourself that opportunity to win. Unfortunately,
it would be a stealing the game, right? That's the exact word here, and maybe that is sort of in the spirit of stealing the game. Jimmy, you're a 30% 3-point shooter. You're not supposed to make that shot, but that is the definition of stealing a game, is doing something you're not really supposed to do. That was I'm pretty sure that was the longest run of the game for Miami, that 11-0 run, right? At the very end there. There was 3 minutes left there. It was, what was it, a 3-point game to start the fourth quarter? And then with 3 minutes, the Celtics just went on another, they stopped every single run Miami went on. Like the Heat didn't really go on a sustained run the entire game until those final 2 minutes, right? Where it was like these little 7-0, 8-0 bursts here and there. But then the Celtics would either, get a stop or get to the free throw line or whatever it was and end the run. Miami, that was it, man. Like, that was the Heat season in a nutshell. That was the Heat series against the Celtics in a nutshell. On the brink of elimination to just keep fighting, and then they kind of go on their biggest run of the game at the very end there. They left it all on the court tonight. Jimmy Butler, obviously, playing 48 minutes. Just another heroic performance from him in this series. I love that he got a vote for the dumb Larry Bird trophy thing. I love that he got it. I love that. Shout out to Tim Bontemps, ESPN, for voting Jimmy Butler his MVP of the Eastern Conference Finals. It was very reminiscent of LeBron kind of getting votes, right, for Finals MVP, though his Cleveland Cavaliers team lost. Just an unbelievable performance from Jimmy Butler overall. We can debate the 3-point look at the end, but it shouldn't take away, and it won't take away from just that performance that he gave tonight and in the series.
Yeah. In an ultimate bit of irony, Miami wound up winning that quarter after the debate all series long about who wins quarter. Miami actually wins the fourth quarter battle, but unfortunately lose the game. So we'll continue to take questions. We don't really have I don't think, a plan necessarily to give out credit to any players. We don't necessarily want to lay blame either. And it's not quite time to look ahead to the offseason. There's plenty of time for that, and we'll always provide coverage of any moves that Miami makes. We can look into who stays, who leaves, and things of that sort, potential trades. We've already got questions about it in the chat. I don't think this is the right time for it. Miami had a hell of a season. It was a fantastic game. Unfortunately, they had problems early on, and they just couldn't seem to overcompensate. They had opportunities to win it. They missed shots at the line. They missed shots beyond the three-point line. They just couldn't get it done, and
Right.
it shouldn't come down to just that shot by Jimmy. I'm sure a lot of people will focus on that, but that's not really
No.
the story of the game.
No, the free throws were a big issue. You can't shoot 67% from the free throw line and try to win a game. There was so many things that were just going against Miami. I thought it was an incredible performance from Jimmy. Bam Adebayo was also awesome.
Yes.
25 points on 12 of 21 shooting, 11 rebounds. He was aggressive the way that the Heat needed him to be aggressive. It was Bam and Jimmy tonight, man.
Oh, yeah.
And Kyle Lowry found his shot towards the end. He got off to a really rough start. There were some defensive miscues that were very strange. But then at the end, I actually thought Lowry, his second half was way better than his first half. He flipped the script. Like, his defense on Jason Tatum was really solid in the second half in a way that I thought he was gambling a little too much in the first half and got burnt a few times. And then the shot started to fall in the second half after he got off to a slow start in the first half. So, not like when you look at the box score, it was Miami's top three guys, Jimmy, Bam, and Kyle, who led the team in scoring, right? So, those guys did step up. I know it was a rough game from Lowry, but ultimately he did step up. Strus hit the big three at the end there to cut the lead to one possession. Too many missed free throws, too many tough turnovers, too many leaks in transition defense early in the game, particularly. And Boston got out to that early lead that you mentioned, David. But after that, it was pretty much even the entire game. If not for that early, that early deficit, Miami probably wins this game. Now, that doesn't really mean anything. That was part of the game. So it just kind of feels like the Celtics started the game on a run. The Heat ended the game on a run, like whatever. But it was. I'm glad they made that final push at the end. I'll say that. Like that, it was looking there like with 4 minutes left that this was just going to be a 10-point win by the Celtics and they're going to go to the finals. The Heat making that last gasp, making that last push, that was everything that is so lovable about this Miami Heat team.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. We'll continue to break down some of the key performances from the game and who stepped up and who didn't later on the show. And of course, we'll continue to take your questions. So make sure you send those in on the chat. We'd love to hear from you as we record this live episode of Locked On Heat. But first, just a reminder that our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, which unfortunately came to an end for Miami, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure to go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board with host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and the author of the NBA Big Board newsletter, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA draft, mock draft, player rankings, and of course, big boards. That's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, David, big picture. Let's zoom out a little bit. How do you feel about this Miami Heat season? Does this qualify as a disappointment? Given that you obviously felt like the Heat could have won this game, where are you at right now?
No, not in the least. I think Miami overachieved. I think they assembled this roster with a proven player in Kyle Lowry, two potential all-stars in Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, and a well-rounded cast of characters, and just a good supporting cast in Tyler Hero and almost everybody else who had contributed at some point throughout the season. I mean, to make that change from Duncan Robinson to Max Strus, to be able to get quality play from Gabe Vincent Oladipo, Victor Oladipo, and just have everybody step up. Like, Miami had to make adjustments throughout the season, throughout the playoffs. They responded in kind. And as I said before, Miami was one of the 4 best teams in the NBA. Like, they were able to push a Celtics team that had a lot of momentum and a lot of things in their favor for most of the second half of the season, even perhaps beyond that. And they were a good team. Miami just fell short. They worked very hard to get to this point. You have home court advantage, and unfortunately just can't make the next transition into the NBA Finals. Who knows what would have happened if Miami had been able to advance to the finals to face the Golden State Warriors. But having said that, you look at with their effort, you look at Jimmy's incredible play as an individual superstar, and everything that they were able to get. And I don't see any cause for concern. I don't see any reason why anybody would be disappointed in the season. You could be disappointed in the loss as it stands out, but over time that will pass too, because Miami gave their effort. They gave their all. As you said before, they left it all out there and they tried their best. And that's all you can really hope for. Like, I don't think that they shot themselves in the foot necessarily. They just made mistakes in a crucial time.
Mm-hmm.
And having said that, they were still very, very good and right there within seconds. And to get to that point, I think is an incredible accomplishment and deserving of the recognition and praise that they deserve.
I said early in the season, when it was clear that this team had a chance to go all the way and win a championship this year, anything less than the Eastern Conference Finals would have been a disappointment. The Heat went to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. They were maybe a Jimmy Butler three-pointer away from going to the NBA Finals, right? I don't think you can label this season a disappointment. I am a little disappointed in the manner with which they did lose and didn't make the finals. They were just on their very last legs at the end of this series. The 3-point shooting thing never came back for the Heat. It never turned around. What was the best 3-point shooting team in the season by percentage shot 20% in Game 7 from distance. And that is, if we were going to do the blame pie segment, David, that would be where we would start, right? Is
without
just
doubt
missing threes. And this was you just were sort of waiting for that reversion to the mean, right? Where they were going to go back to being a 37% or something close to that 3-point shooting team. And they just never got there. They never got out of their own way. And it wouldn't surprise me is their overall postseason 3-point shooting percentage now like below 30% or right around 30%? Because I think it might be after this loss. So either way, it felt like there was a lot of games there where they were shooting sub 33%, making less than a third of their shots from beyond the arc. And so that to me is the most disappointing thing. Is it just felt like I'm not trying to blame it on like the make or miss kind of thing, because I do think that it's much more nuanced than that. I think Boston did a good job of forcing Miami into the threes that they wanted to give them and not necessarily the threes that they didn't want to give them, right? They didn't give up a bunch of stuff from the corners. It was mostly above the break stuff. It wasn't the guys that they really didn't want shooting the ball. Tyler Hero was obviously hurt, which was a factor, but it just felt like that like kind of reversion to being a good 3-point shooting team. We were waiting for it all playoffs long, and it just never happened. And it kind of feels like, okay, if they could have just gotten a couple games, like one more Max Strus game, or maybe a Duncan Robinson game off the bench, or if Tyler Hero's not hurt and you get a scorching hot game from him from distance in one game, maybe that's enough to swing this series or something like that. But never happened. So that would be my one disappointment.
Yeah, we should talk about Tyler a little bit, because he did try to come back for tonight's game. He was available to play before the game. Eric Spoelstra saying he would warm up with the intention to play, which has been given almost 100% of the time, I think, that he's going to play. If he can warm up, he'll be out there, and that was the case tonight. Unfortunately, Tyler limited to just 7 minutes of play overall, so 7.5 or something like that, and was mostly ineffective. He just didn't have any bursts, couldn't get his shot off, was struggling, was picked on defensively, and was clear not 100%. And if he's not going to be contributing offensively, he can't get his shot going, if he can't provide that spark that he has all season long, well, he does become, even still, a defensive liability. And so he was virtually unplayable. You wonder whether or not Spo might have thought about playing him late in the game, if maybe, as we've seen so often from Tyler, late game heroics might have saved Miami's season. But Spo making the call and not going with him. He also chose not to play PJ Tucker late in the game. Tucker only wound up playing 17 minutes in the whole game. Not much of a factor. Went with Victor Oladipo for 30-plus minutes. And while Oladipo struggled, at least he was a strong defender, just as he has been in his limited playing time. And wound up being a pretty solid contributor, although his offense was still, well, mostly ineffective. I don't
Didn't
know
go
where
with
to
Gabe
take it.
Vincent. I don't know. Did he took that hard fall, checked out
Yeah,
a little bit after that, never came back into the game. So I don't know if it was a matter of Gabe got hurt and just wasn't available. I would have liked to see no Caleb Martin in the game, but that was
yeah, a
because
little
Jimmy Butler
surprising.
played every single minute. Yeah, you could have probably put Caleb and Jimmy out there, but I understand why you wouldn't because of the spacing concerns there. And like unlike with PJ, he's not like Caleb's not giving you like that much size and strength and rebounding and stuff the way that PJ does. So I I think that was just a matter of Jimmy deciding that he was going to play all 48 minutes, right?
Yeah,
You're okay with that, right? The Jimmy playing 48 minutes?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you have plenty of time to rest. Game one of the NBA Finals, had they advanced, would have been on Thursday. Plenty of time for him to rest. This wasn't, the rush of trying to come back in a couple of days. You leave it all out for a game seven because there is no return from that. Either you win or you go home. Unfortunately, Miami going home. So absolutely, 48 minutes was fine. I don't think it would have aggravated anything. He can have the rest of the offseason to potentially get surgery, to do whatever he has to, but he would have been fine, I think, by game one of the NBA Finals. They probably would have taken a couple of days off, much needed rest for everybody to try and get a chance to recover, including Jimmy and his knee. And look, he was still phenomenal. Like he was still contributing, he was still making great plays defensively, doing everything he could, getting his shot off. There were a couple of times there where I think he was kind of looking for a bailout foul call and wasn't getting the call
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. Unfortunately, he also missed a couple of free throws that normally he does make. Maybe that would have been a game, the game for Miami also, but that's not the case. Like he was tired and he should have been. Like he played 48 minutes, something you rarely see. Look on the opposite side of the equation, and you can point to
No,
Tatum's age. He played 45
yeah,
minutes. Like he was out there
yeah.
for almost as long as Jimmy was. So this was a dire situation for
And
both
Jimmy's
teams.
still making like that hustle play to knock the ball
Yep.
off of Marcus Smart at the end there, and that was after he played 44 minutes or something like that. Was
Yep.
incredible. Yeah, he left it all out there. Armando writes in, Boston was the better team. What was very disappointing is losing 3 games at home. While we're on the
That's
topic of
fair.
what was and wasn't disappointing,
That's
good
fair.
point. Yeah, it's really hard to lose 3 games at home and win a playoff series. Just point blank, right? We could talk about all the other things and the fact that Miami did have a chance, that they did win games in Boston.
Yeah.
But the Celtics also have not lost consecutive games all playoffs now, right?
Yeah.
So credit to them. But yeah, tough to lose 3 games at home and try to win that series. Anything else from this game? What did you think
From the
about
game.
taking away Struce's 3? We got a question
Oh,
about that. I'm trying to find it.
yeah.
I've never
I
seen anything
don't.
like that before. I'm not saying it was the wrong call. Some people were trying to look at the film. It was like, did he really step out of bounds? Did he not? My thing was like that. Like 3 or 4 minutes went by, and they just took it off the scoreboard. I don't
Yeah.
think I've ever seen anything like that. I
Well,
could
that
be
was the
wrong
first
and not
stop and
remembering
play.
it.
I think it was the first stoppage in play where they actually had a
So
chance to
yeah,
go back and look at it, maybe. But even then, I mean, again, like just as we're saying with Jimmy's 3-point attempt, like it should never have come down to just one make. Like had he made that shot, look, Miami still loses by one. Like if they
why do
had
you
gone
say that? You've said that a couple times. I don't know. It's Game 7 of the conference finals. Why wouldn't it just come down to one shot?
because they missed 18 other 3-point attempts or whatever it was. Like I don't even know how many they missed, but they
Oh, I
shot
see what you
20% from
mean.
three. Yeah, like in the context of how many shots they missed and the free throws
And the
they missed
free
and everything
throws,
else.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean they missed 24 3-pointers. That one got taken away, and that Jimmy missed one with 16 seconds left shouldn't have been a deciding factor. Again, for a team that shot the best from the 3-point line in the NBA during the regular season, they couldn't hit a shot. And like that was Kyle struggling, that was Victor struggling, that was
Yeah.
everybody missing. Kyle Lowry went 1 of 6 from 3-point range. Max Strus shot 2 of 7, 1 of 3 for Gabe Vincent, 1 of 7 from Victor Oladipo. For all that we're talking about his ability to drive to the rim and potentially get to the line, he wasn't looking to do so today. He was just basically an outlet, from beyond the arc to potentially soften up Boston's defense and maybe get a score here and there, but he wasn't. He only finished with 9 points on 4 of 12 shooting. So not a great game for him. So I think that's what it really boils down to is, you had plenty of opportunities throughout the game, which is why I kind of always dismiss foul calls too, because it's like the officiating almost always tends to balance out. Like you could point to bad officiating on both sides of the thing. It was kind of hilarious, really, to hear before the game that Scott Foster was assigned to Game 7, and fans on both sides saying, "Oh, there goes the
Yeah,
game."
here we go. Nobody wants Scott Foster. One quick note on Scott Foster. The Heat actually, as a franchise, have a better winning percentage than the Celtics do while Scott Foster is officiating games between those two teams. Or not, I'm sorry, not between those two teams, in general, like regardless of matchup. Didn't love the officiating in this game. Definitely thought specifically in the third quarter that Boston got a favorable whistle. I think overall in the series, we could probably have this conversation. And I'm not an officiating guy. I don't want to talk about it that much, but I will.
Yeah.
And the Heat did not lose this series or this game because of the officiating. But I do think it's pretty clear, and this is not just me saying this, but you get like very objective people saying, like, Zach Lowe has said this on his podcast, and he's not an officiating guy either. He doesn't talk about this stuff all that much, but he's even said, like, yeah, Boston's getting a little bit of a favorable whistle in this series. Now, if you want to read into that and say that there's some vast conspiracy that the NBA wanted the Celtics in the finals, go for it. Have fun. You're a sports fan. That's what you get to do. I don't think that that's the case. I just think it's more coincidence, just sort of random variance. But I do think that happened, is all I'm saying. That was just that existed. A favorable whistle to Boston, not by a huge, just a smidge, but it was there.
I will say one more thing. Like, we gave credit to Bam, and well deserved. And I think I know where you're going to go with this, but considering he was the more aggressive version of himself, is it more frustrating that he didn't do this at various points throughout the series when he could have been more aggressive? Like, it seemed like they finally figured out Robert Williams to some degree. Yeah. They were attacking. He was putting pressure on Horford and Williams. He was driving to the hoop. He was getting it done offensively. Like, great game from Bam. Do fans take away from that as a positive, that this is something he can continue to build on in year 6 of his career? Or is it more frustrating that he just didn't do this in various games throughout the series?
Well, first point on the Robert Williams thing, it kind of felt like both teams just figured out each other perfectly by the end of this. Yep. Boston was getting Miami to take the shots that they wanted to take. Miami figured out the Robert Williams problem and was getting to the rim more often. And you could say the same things about both teams on both ends of the court. They figured out it was just who was going to play better, who was going to be healthier, who was just going to make shots, so who was just going to get shots to fall. And that's what we basically got the last two games. What was such a boring, confusing, weird series of blowouts for the first 5 games of the series. Yeah. We had 2 classics in Game 6 and Game 7. So a really fun series overall. I think we're going to walk away thinking about it as a fun series, even though the first 5 games were all garbage. But and I think that's kind of my Bam Adebayo take also. Yeah. Like, were there moments in this series where you wanted more? There was the 6-point just dud in the middle of this series.
Yeah.
But I do think overall, you're going to come away from this and be like, dude played incredible defense all 7 games. Never let it up on that end of the court. That's for sure. And had a 31-point outing, had a 25-point outing tonight. Like, he put up some of his best performances of his career during this series too. So I think, wasn't perfect, right? Kind of weird and strange and confusing, and no real explanation for some of the stuff that happened for him in this series. But overall, I thought it was a really strong series from him.
Yeah, agreed. I'm sure we'll talk about that throughout the rest of the offseason too. I'm sure a lot of people will question what he does next, and we won't answer those throughout the offseason because we're not going anywhere. We're going to continue to provide the same coverage that you've come to expect. We'll talk about all the other things that they can do during the offseason, what happens to individual players. As always, we'll always do our player breakdowns and our exit interviews and things of that sort. So we'll be continuing to cover this team throughout the offseason, as always. So make sure to stay tuned for that. But we'll wrap up today's show in the next segment with your questions. So make sure to continue to send those in. And you're listening or watching Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Just a reminder, you can always continue to reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review. I just want to say, I'm sure we'll continue to mention this at various points throughout the offseason. And right now, we're all kind of still reeling from the intensity of Game 6. But our audience has been so supportive from day one of our show throughout this whole season. With your return, Wes, and everything else, we've changed our format. We've done different things throughout the season, and we've continued to build this platform on YouTube and on all of our podcast platforms, and we continue to grow as one of the, if not the best podcast available to cover your team, the Miami Heat. And we thank you all so much for your constant support and all the questions and comments. And again, just everybody tuning in. Again, after a tough Game 7 loss, there should be no reason why anybody wants to hear us talking about this game. I know myself, I'd rather probably just drink my sorrows away, but that's not going to happen. I'm here during the show, and I get to do it with a great supporting fan base. With all the questions about Miami's fans not showing up to the games and things of that sort, you all have proven once again to be the best fan base in the NBA. So we'll get to some of these questions now as we address the tough loss in Game 7.
Well, let's spin it positive. You mentioned the tough loss and how a lot of fans might not. Let's just live in a daydream here for a minute and answer this question from Kenneth, who writes in. I know Jimmy is going to have nightmares about that 3, but man, imagine the memory he would have carved out in the NBA lore if that had went down. Jimmy put on a masterclass Game 6 and 7. Got to agree. Absolute masterclass Game 6 and 7. You know what? You know we love hypotheticals here. We don't really do game hypotheticals on this show, David. This is one of the first that I can remember even doing, but I think it's worth it. Let's imagine here for a minute. That shot goes down. Jimmy Butler, Marcus Smart misses the layup. Jimmy Butler gets the basket, goes down, hits that leaning forward three-pointer. I mean, what happens next?
From that point forward, you mean in the context of the game, or just in terms of Jimmy's overall career, or
the career? Yeah, just the conversation. I mean, it's our hypothetical. We get to do whatever we want with it. Jimmy hits the three. He'd get a stop at the other end, ride momentum, and then end up stealing this Game 7 at home, and just sort of all of a sudden, the Celtics are looking around. Oh my God, we were up like 11, 10 points, whatever it was, with 3 minutes left, and all of a sudden we look up and there's zeros on the clock, and now we're losing for the first time in this game. The Heat steal that game, go on to Game 7. Jimmy Butler gets the Larry Bird MVP trophy, takes that Larry Bird trophy, sticks it in the toilet, and flushes it down because he don't care about that dumb trophy. And then the Heat are going to the finals. We've got now, from this moment until Thursday's Game 1, to discuss Jimmy Butler. You and I do. ESPN does. Fox Sports. Every radio show that you listen to. Jimmy Butler is the center of the NBA world for the next 2 or 3 days because he made that shot. That goes down with Ray Allen's shot in terms of postseason shots. It goes down with Kyrie's shot in the finals in terms of postseason shots. It goes down with Kawhi's shot against the Sixers when he played for the Raptors. Right? Yep. It's right there. It's all right there. That's what we're talking about with Jimmy Butler. Immortality.
Yeah. Considering his 47-point performance in Game 6, like to sandwich those two together, to follow it up with just, again, if he had hit that 3, we're talking about a 38-point night from him in which he played every second of the game. That is etching yourself in immortality. I saw already a comment about his Hall of Fame candidacy, and I think it strengthens it. I think the playoff showing, and you've been pretty consistent about making this point, that maybe he's not the best player, but that he's certainly a gamer, like a guy who steps up for those big games, and he's proven that. Like, with barring the injury, Miami does not necessarily maybe even have a Game 7. Maybe they close out one of those games that they lost at home. Maybe they win it in Boston. Who knows? The point is, overall, now I think that he has proven that he has had a fantastic career, that he's done everything possible to carry his teams, unfortunately falling just short of an NBA title. I think still deserving of a Hall of Fame ballot. Like, I know a lot of people question who deserves it, who doesn't, whether or not you can be a quote unquote third banana like Chris Bosh in terms of a championship team and things of that sort. But Jimmy has been a fantastic individual player that's always taken every team that he's been on to the playoffs, whether it's the Minnesota Timberwolves, who missed the playoffs in the 4 years following his absence, or the 76ers, who got as close as they ever have with Jimmy on their roster, to taking the Miami Heat to the NBA Finals in his first season here. Like, he's done everything he can. He's always stepped up in big moments, and I think that certainly makes it deserving. Had he made that 3, well, I think it becomes even more of a no-brainer. Like everybody's talking about that 47-point outing. If he hits that 3-point shot and it gets remembered for breaking Boston's back with that attempt, then I think
with a three. He doesn't make threes. It would have been the most Jimmy Butler thing possible. How many Hall of Famers were playing in this game tonight?
Hall of Famers. Period. Like Kyle's the only for sure right now. Jason Tatum is probably
Kyle's the
there.
only for sure. Tatum's on track, right? I mean, he would have to retire.
Jimmy's on track. Yeah,
like tomorrow.
I think
Jimmy's a Hall of Famer. He's gonna make it.
So too.
I would be very surprised. I think Jimmy is pretty much a cinch to make the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and
I don't know if he might end up first ballot. Tatum's career would have to get like something really strange would have to happen. It would have to be like an Andrew Luck, like early retirement or something.
Well, if he gets hurt and it becomes like Brandon Roy or something like that.
Yeah, good point. Jaylen Brown. No, probably not, right? I mean, who knows? Like, so many people in the NBA make it. If he plays in the league for like 17 years, maybe. Marcus Smart, Defensive Player of the Year.
No, he doesn't have the hardware. He doesn't have. I mean, just the individual recognition. Like, he's a great role player, a guy that you probably want to have on your team. As much as it pains me to say this, and yet I don't think he is the kind of player that will get that kind of individual recognition. Aside from this one trophy, like, I mean, Bam's not there. And I think Bam's a better defender, even though he didn't get the award. So I still think Bam's not quite there yet.
Do you think Bam's on
gold medalist
track? Gold medalist,
All-Star, gold medalist,
All-Star,
All NBA defender.
Yep, multiple times.
Yeah, no,
he's gonna. And this is what we talked about when he didn't win Defensive Player of the Year, but was very much in the conversation, even though he wasn't a finalist. He wasn't a top 3 finalist, but he was a top 5 finalist. So like whatever, I don't know.
Yeah,
like he's gonna just be a perennial Defensive Player of the Year candidate for the next 7-8 years, maybe 6-7 years probably. So I think when it's all said and done, 25 years from now, when we're looking back on this, I think we're going to say that there was probably 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 5 Hall of Famers. Al Horford, is he a Hall of Famer?
No, there's no chance. Like, again, like a great player. I mean, I've liked Horford from the time he was at the University of Florida. Yeah, I mean, I remember that year where Miami, and I made this point on a recent episode of Locked On NBA, like they had a chance to sign Horford, who probably wanted to come to Miami, who has ties to the Latin community here, whose father played at the University of Miami, and they went and overpaid for Hassan Whiteside. And I'm thinking to myself, Horford would have been so much of a better fit, a great defender, as good a defender as Whiteside, if not better at that point in time, great passer, great shooter, great player. But not a Hall of Famer. No, a very, very, very good player. And that's fine. That's okay to be a very, very good player and not necessarily have to be immortalized in the Basketball Hall of Fame. He did win championships with the University of Florida, so maybe that skews in his favor. But as of his NBA career, probably not. I don't think he's done enough individually. Having said that, if he wins a title with Boston, perhaps he starts to get that kind of recognition. Because I think a title, recognizing him as a great individual contributor and role player throughout his career, and then all of a sudden being able to cement that with a championship, that certainly helps.
Yeah, if he gets a ring, he might be in. Everybody makes it, I feel like, to the Basketball Hall of Fame. That's the one thing. Philippe asks, Wes and David, are you guys going to be potting during these finals? Yeah, still a 5-day-a-week show, man. We're here. Subscribe, YouTube, everywhere you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, wherever you listen to your podcast. We're just going to still be here talking a whole lot of off-season stuff. I'm sure we'll talk about the finals a little bit.
We won't be recapping finals games that have the way we have with Miami. Like, I'm not ready to make that transition where I want to talk about the Warriors beating the Celtics or anything like that. And that is my prediction, by the way.
This comes from What's Happening. What is your biggest takeaway from the series and playoff run for the Heat? That's a good question. Your biggest single takeaway, David?
Biggest takeaway from the series. That Bam needs to improve as a complimentary scorer, I think, is a big part of the series. I would say that is that's like Jimmy did everything he could, and I continue to have questions. I had questions about Jimmy continuing to play at this incredible high level, following what we had seen from him in the NBA Finals a couple of years ago, and he went and followed that up with a very strange MVP type season in a COVID shortened year. And then he followed that up with another all-star campaign this year and put on some historically great all-star performances, but at some point, age is going to catch up. He's not going to be able to continue on this track for much longer, even if he's going to get paid $50 million a year or not. And having said that, you need somebody else to step up. So I think that's it. As far as the playoff run is concerned, the Miami wind up having the same shortcomings exposed that they have all season in terms of how they generate points in the half-court offense, and that they can be beaten. And they were. That's just basically what it came down to. Had they been able to score on just a few possessions, tonight's game ends in very different fashion. I know that's kind of simplistic, but it's also the truth.
So your Bam point, we're going to get to that in the next question. But my takeaway from this playoff run, I have been on this entire time, and I'm not unique in this. And in fact, I probably listened to people too much, other people too much on this, that Jimmy Butler isn't that A-level, A-list star franchise player who can be the best player on a championship team. I believe that. I said that. That in today's NBA, he's not that kind of player. He's not Giannis. He's not LeBron. Like, he's not KD. He's not that level. My takeaway from these playoffs is that, yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. He doesn't play like the stars do today. He doesn't take a whole lot of threes. He doesn't make a whole lot of threes. He's not really perimeter oriented. He's not very flashy. Right? Like, he's not a flashy level scorer. He doesn't have that smooth jumper the way that Jason Tatum does, right? It's not his game. And yet, he's always sort of been considered all-star, probably should be a perennial all-star. He should be an all-star every year he's healthy, and probably will be and would be. But always sort of on the outside of the top 10. You know, when you have your top 10 players in the NBA, he's always like somewhere under like 11, 12, 15, like depending on who you ask, just sort of knocking on that door, but never quite in there. And Jason Tatum was in that group with Jimmy for the last couple of years too, but he's 24 years old and he's got that flashy smooth jumper and all these things. And all of a sudden, one good playoff series against Brooklyn, and they elevate him into that conversation, right? Because you're young, and we start to project a little bit more going forward. But with Jimmy Butler, he has those Thibodeau miles from earlier in his career. He's obviously on the other side of 30 as opposed to Jason Tatum. And so we just sort of cap those guys as far as the basketball media is concerned. We just don't really let guys like that have their best years in what is supposed to be after their aged prime, right? And so that is clearly, however, what is happening with Jimmy Butler. He is better now than he has ever been. And I will include the 2020 playoff run in the bubble in that. He was better in this playoff run than he was in the bubble. He is better now as a basketball player than I've ever seen him play. Is he as athletic as he was maybe 6 years ago? No. But he's a better overall basketball player. And no, he doesn't have that perimeter-oriented game that the way the stars of today's game have. But if you go before that, he's very much in the mold of the superstars that we were accustomed to watching growing up and what we saw before, like the three-point revolution, right? Like, he, more than anybody left in the playoffs, was making an impact on every single possession, offensive and defensive. He wasn't shooting threes, but he was scoring a ton of points. He was getting to the rim. He was getting fouls. Like, that was sort of the old star, the old superstar, the guy that we used to think, that's the guy you want leading your championship team, right? And so I think he's definitely throwback, but I think it still works in today's modern NBA. And so I don't know how much longer we have that version of Jimmy Butler, but I would say that the Heat, if they can get this version of Jimmy Butler next year in the playoffs, that they still have a chance, that this window is still open for them. That's my takeaway from the playoffs.
Two points I want to add. One, look, I know for our listeners on podcast platforms, they can't see these comments, but it's kind of sad that the Celtics fans can't revel in their win and have nothing better to do but to come on here and to criticize Jimmy Butler of all people. And that leads to my second point, because I think he proved over the last two games that he's still the better player at this point in time. Like, maybe, again, overall, in terms of overall projections and whether, where they stand in terms of NBA, top players in the NBA, that doesn't matter. Jimmy was a better player in the series. He was the best player in the series, something that was strongly debated whether or not he was even the third best player, if you recall our preview with our Locked on Celtics counterpart, John Corrales. So a little disappointed to see Celtics fans have nothing better to do than to complain about Jimmy Butler of all people. You've got your own issues to worry about. Worry about stopping Steph Curry and Draymond Green and superstar Kevon Looney. So I think that's the big question for you guys.
Where was the Bam question? Here it is from Craig. I'd like to see Bam work on his face-up game and play more 4 next year and get a true big, move him to the 5. I'm in small ball lineups.
Yep.
Without getting, I'm okay with. I think the Heat are one more big away from sort of completing the front court. PJ and Bam obviously work together in that front court, but PJ's not getting any younger. Also, PJ has a player option, so we're not really sure what his deal is in terms of whether or not he's going to be back here. It's kind of up to him and what the market dictates for him. And Miami is capped out, and they don't have any of his bird rights or anything like that, so we'll see. But I do think that they are another big away, and I wouldn't mind seeing Bam at the 4 a little bit next year. Now, I know we don't want to go too far forward, but in terms of his face-up game, I really like when he's feeling that face-up game, and now he's able to take on those mismatches, get switched onto smaller guards. We saw that in the 31-point game, him facing up Marcus Smart and just shooting right over the top of him. I think that's definitely, to your point, David, that you talked about, like getting Bam to be more of a consistent second offensive player next to Jimmy, a second option next to Jimmy. That's probably where we have to start, is with the face-up game, right?
Yeah. As far as 5, whether or not they want to compliment him like that, like I've seen that point being made before. It's an interesting one. I know a lot of people point to the fact that he started alongside Myers Leonard a couple seasons ago, and that worked out pretty well during the regular season. It did not work out so well, if you recall, during the playoffs when they went with Jay Crowder at the 4, who's a very similar player in terms of what he can do in space the floor, like PJ Tucker. So. I'm not sure if that's the best version of Bam yet. I still think that he can play center in today's game, and I don't know. It's a weird, tiring question, because then we see him have games like this against a bigger front court in Williams and Horford, and he holds his own just fine. So I don't know if having him play alongside a more traditional center or big or something like that is really what he needs to unlock his career. And I think it won't matter, until your point, until he unlocks part of his offense.
The best version of the Heat is Bam Adebayo playing the 5 and a stretch 4, whether it's Jay Crowder or PJ Tucker when his shot is falling next to him, right? That's the best version of the Heat. That's not to say that they shouldn't be able to also throw out some other looks, especially when you're in a conference that looks like it's going to go through Boston and Milwaukee now. And those front courts are so big and so versatile. Like what Boston can do, starting games with Horford and Robert Williams, and then being able to toggle in Grant Williams and then move Horford over. Like, that's just a level of versatility that the Heat don't really have. And that's not, like, Dwayne Dedmon got played off the floor in this series, right? Yeah. He's not to that level. Omer Yurtseven's young, promising, encouraged what we saw from him, but not ready for these moments. And so I that could be something the Heat explore. Whether or not they start games like that, kind of play in the middle with Bam at the 4, kind of upsize during portions of the game. I think that could be interesting, but I'd like to see them at least have the other option there, right? Because it kind of appeared like at the end by the end of the series they only had 2 playable bigs. That was Bam and PJ, and even PJ didn't play at the end of this one. So you would like to just have a few more options. Looking at some more, do you see any other questions here that?
No, I had not really looked at any of the questions. And look, there's plenty of time to address the offseason, and everybody's asking us about roster changes and things of that sort. I'm not quite ready for that yet. I don't think you are. I don't think we should.
How about this one? Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Would you root for Boston?
No.
Just so that you could say in the last 3 years you're ousted by the champions? No.
Nope. No. I wasn't rooting for the Lakers when they beat Miami. I wasn't ready to give them credit after Goran Dragic and Bam Adebayo got hurt in Game 1. Milwaukee had a good playoff run despite the fact that they swept Miami. Having said that, looking to you covered the Warriors. You developed personal relationships with those players and that team. I would find you hard pressed to say, oh yeah, I'd certainly root for Marcus Smart and Grant Williams moving forward in the next round. So I feel the same way. I'm not rooting for the Celtics.
Quick finals prediction then. Regardless
Warriors
of
in
your
5.
interest. Warriors in 5.
Yeah.
So I think I got this stat right. The Celtics are the only team in the Steve Kerr era to have a winning record against the Warriors. I don't think that the Warriors have faced a defense even close to what Boston can provide.
Dallas is pretty good defensively.
Not in that series, they weren't. But I see your point. No. They were not as good. They were not good in that series. And yeah, you got to give credit to the Warriors for sort of breaking that defense. Right. But when you're talking about a team whose best defender is Dorian Finney-Smith, and you're racking up a lot of those defensive metrics in the Western Conference, where you're not really playing these kinds of series that we just saw between Miami and Boston. I think that the Celtics have so many guys, but that rotation that they used tonight, where's the defensive weak point? There's not even like a Luka that they can target or a Jalen Brunson that they could target the way that you can on Dallas. They chase over screens really well. I mean, I don't know.
Are they going to shut down Golden State's 3-point shooting the way they did Miami's? Because I felt like Miami still had plenty of open looks, and I don't think Golden State's going to miss them. They're rested. Yeah, I just.
But Golden State won that Mavericks series by getting to the basket, and that's sort of they won that because Dallas was just letting them get to the rim. I don't know. I picked against Golden State in the Memphis series. I still think that they would have lost that series had Ja Morant stayed healthy.
Perhaps.
But I don't know. I haven't dug into it enough. But I thought this was the matchup a lot of people wanted to see for a reason. They're not just because people like these two teams, but also because it's going to be a really good series. Not to say that the Heat couldn't have won that series, but I'm just trying to make the point overall. Do you trust, from Eli, do you trust Kyle Lowry to come back in better shape? I actually do.
I don't know what better shape is. Like
better than what he was in now would help.
Well, he was hurt. It's not like he was in bad shape, and he's never going to be committed to the Miami Heat offseason training program and things of that sort. Like, we haven't been in that locker room in a couple of years now. I've never seen Kyle without his shirt off or whatever. I don't think that he's necessarily fat. Maybe he looks a little soft, but I'll always say that I was under that same impression about NBA players being soft. I know Kendrick Perkins is a very different person now that he's an ESPN commentator, but at the time he's with the Oklahoma City Thunder, a lot of people called him fat and useless. And at the same time, when my first locker room experience covering an Orlando Magic game facing the Oklahoma City Thunder, Perkins was ripped. Everybody on an NBA roster is basically ripped. And they made the same comment about Luka Doncic. Like, maybe he doesn't look like your typical NBA player, but he's not fat. He just doesn't look – he's not lean like Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo or something like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's fat either. Kyle's not fat. He's not going to lose more weight even at this point in his career. I'm sure Pat will tell him that, and I'm sure Kyle will promptly wipe his ass with it. I don't think he's necessarily going to do anything different at this stage of his career, quite frankly, because he doesn't have to. He's still a very, very good player. And that he got hurt late in the season, I don't think is necessarily an indicator that he's carrying 5 to 10 extra pounds. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't know that he's going to be willing. Maybe Jimmy's in his ear all offseason and says, you know what, stay off the golf course, come with me, do a workout. Well, camp out for a week at my house. Say goodbye to the wife and kids, and just play spades and work out 3 times a day like Jimmy does.
I don't know what I trust. I just know that he needs to get in better shape. Like Luka, you're right. It's an interesting comparison, but Luka was out of shape. He admitted it to start the season. He had to play himself into shape. I think Kyle Lowry needs to get into the best shape of his life this offseason. That would be, if I'm the Heat's front office and in exit interviews, that's what I'm telling him, is you got to get into the best shape of your career. And this isn't just fat shaming or anything like that. That's not what this is. It's
obviously not.
You're getting older, and in order to sustain this level of play, and by the way, make this contract look okay for us, you need to be getting into the best shape of your life. And I think that's going to be a big part of it. I do think that when you zoom out and kind of look at the season overall for Kyle Lowry, it was a little disappointing. And I think that's okay. I think that's okay to say at this point, right? I think you wanted more consistent scoring from him this season, especially in the playoffs. And I think that's, if you're the Heat, what you're aiming to get next year is a more in shape Kyle Lowry who won't be hurt by the time the playoffs roll around. And then we have to answer these kinds of questions. Can you recommend comfort food after losing Game 7?
No, comfort drink maybe is
whiskey. Does that count?
It's a carb. It works.
Thanks, Wes and David. See you next season. You don't have to wait that long. We'll be back here the rest of this week. This is the first show of the week. We'll have more episodes. Don't just do that.
Yeah. Don't write
Yeah.
us off just because Miami wound up losing Game 7. We'll still be here talking about the NBA and of course the Heat, and we've got a lot of offseason plans to give you all the coverage that you expect from us.
All right. I think those were all the questions. I think we're here. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
that should do it for this show. That does it for the
Yep.
Miami Heat season. But again, we'll be covering the offseason just as we always do, and hopefully you'll stay with us. Make sure to subscribe to the show. And thanks to everybody who's made Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make your second listen Locked On NBA. I'll still be on there, and so will you, Wes, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. From the first jump ball, the play-in tournament, to the last possession of the finals, Locked On experts take you deep inside the playoffs with insight and analysis affecting all 30 teams. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap up the season, B.